The movie begins with a man named Robert McCall, who works at a Home Mart hardware store. During break time, Robert meets his coworker named Ralphie, who is undergoing a diet program to take part in the security guard selection. In the evenings, Robert always takes the time to read a book at a restaurant, where he always brings his own tea bags and cutlery. The restaurant was not too crowded that night. That night, there were only a few customers, including a pretty girl named Alina, who greeted Robert and asked him about the story told in the book he was reading. Soon, Alina said goodbye to Robert and left the place. She said goodbye to Robert and left the place, hailing a taxi. The next day, Robert went back to his usual activities, went to work at Home Mart, chatted with Ralphie and the other coworkers, then came home to clean up. He also had dinner, and that evening, Robert returned to visit his regular diner with a book and read it. Shortly after Robert arrived there, Alina was seen entering the diner in skimpy clothes and heavy makeup. Alina was just about to order a drink when suddenly her cell phone rang, a call from her boss. Alina turns out to be a teenage prostitute who's working under the name Terry, for the Russian mob, Slavy. That night, Alina was required to serve a customer who had picked up Alina in front of the diner. The next day, Robert was accompanying Ralphie, who was doing physical exercises to lose weight so that he could take the security officer selection exam. Even though Ralphie seemed to have a hard time and almost gave up because of the very heavy training portion, Robert continued to encourage the man and help him with all his heart so that Ralphie could fulfill his desire to become a security guard. Long story short, Robert went back to his usual activities, including visiting his regular restaurant and spending his time there reading books, where that night, Alina was already there first. Alina then walked over to Robert at the corner of her favorite table, and asked him for permission before sitting there. Robert allowed Alina to sit and accompany him, after which he noticed bruises on Alina's beautiful face. After chatting for a while, Robert finds out that Alina is forced to work for Slavy because of debt, when in fact, the girl has a dream to become a famous singer. Alina then gave Robert a CD containing a recording of a song sung by her. Robert was very happy to receive the gift and promised the girl that he would listen. After spending time chatting casually at the diner, Robert then decided to take Alina home on foot. Along the way, they had quite an interesting conversation, until finally, a car stopped right in front of them. A man, who was none other than Slavy, got out of the car and went straight to Alina. Slavy then slapped and strangled Alina because the girl had disappointed her customer last night and demanded compensation from Slavy. Seeing this, Robert was about to help Alina, but Slavy then threatened him not to interfere. Slavy then gave a business card to Robert and asked the man to contact him if he needed a comfort woman. After that, Slavy took Alina away from there. In the following nights, Robert no longer saw Alina at his regular diner. One night, one of the employees at the diner told Robert that Alina had been beaten by someone and was currently being treated at the hospital. Hearing this, Robert then went to the hospital and found Alina lying helpless with a face covered in bruises. A girl who is Alina's coworker named Mandy then tells Robert that Alina has been beaten by Slavy for often rebelling and disobeying Slavy's orders. Seeing Alina's very poor condition and also suffering because she often received harsh treatment from customers and her pimp, Robert then became sorry and decided to help Alina get out of the problems and complicated situations she faced. The scene then switches and shows Slavy entering his fancy restaurant. Slavy then headed to his office, where several of his men had been waiting for the man's arrival to deposit some money from the people who owed Slavy. Not long after, Robert entered Slavy's office and offered the man some money to free Alina, so that the girl would no longer have to work for Slavy. But the offer was immediately rejected by Slavy and said that he could make more money if Alina returned to work for him.
Insult me. Take your fucking money and go back to your house and chop yourself up 9,000 they need help.
Since Slavy refused his offer, Robert took the money back and walked towards the door. After being in front of the door, Robert did not immediately leave Slavy's office. The man instead locked the door and turned his body to face Slavy and his henchmen. For a while, Robert made a brief observation of the people in the room, as well as the items in there, where Robert estimated that it would take him only 16 seconds to kill everyone in the room. Slavi and all his henchmen were overthrown by Robert, who slaughtered them with a cold, expressionless face. Slavi begged Robert to spare his life, but it was too late since Slavi flatly refused Robert's offer at the start of their meeting. After that, Robert went home and went back to his usual activities on the following days. Robert had watched a broadcast on television that reported on the murder of Slavi and his henchmen, where the police concluded that the murder was due to a heated feud between gangs that often occurred. The scene then switches and shows a man named Teddy Renson, who has just landed in the United States and immediately rushed to the location of Slavi's murder. Teddy is an errand boy for Vladimir Pushkin, Slavi's boss, who is sent to investigate Slavi's murder and find the mastermind behind the murder. As a former member of the Russian secret police with special force training, Teddy could easily conclude that the person who had killed Slavi and his henchmen was not a random person, but rather someone who was trained to fight and kill. Meanwhile, Robert is shocked by the news of Ralphie's resignation. When Robert visited Ralphie at his residence, the man seemed to be helping his mother clean up his mother's shop, which was deliberately set on fire by corrupt police officers because her mother refused to give the security allowance. Because of this, Ralphie decided to quit his job at Home Mart and wanted to focus on helping his mother at the store. In the evening, Robert decides to help Ralphie, where the man secretly follows corrupt cops who collect security allowances from small business owners in Ralphie's area. Robert then recorded the actions of the corrupt policemen, then came to them and threatened to distribute the footage if they did not stop their actions. The corrupt cops had fought back, but Robert was stronger.
Death wish, pal. What the fuck do you want? Punk.
Fuck up.
Money you extorted from those people.
After being beaten by Robert to a pulp, the corrupt policemen returned what they had taken from the residents and no longer carried out the act. Because Ralphie's mother had received venture capital to renovate her shop and run her business again, Ralphie finally returned to work at Home Mart and continued his hard training and succeeded in realizing his desire to become a security officer. Elsewhere, Teddy seems to be interrogating gangsters who are often involved in business with Slavi, where Teddy does not hesitate to resort to violence to get the information he needs to find the mastermind behind Slavi's murder. With no results, Teddy then conducts an investigation with the prostitutes who are Slavi's subordinates, where Teddy finally finds out about Alina, who has had problems with Slavi recently. Teddy then goes to Mandy and urges the girl to reveal all the information about Alina and her rebellion to Slavi. Mandy then told Teddy about the black man who had come to visit Alina in the hospital. After that, Teddy kills Mandy. After receiving information from Mandy, Teddy immediately checked the CCTV cameras at the hospital and at the location of Slavi's murder, where Robert's figure was seen there even though it looked dim. One day, Robert is again faced with a situation where he is required to act quickly and incapacitate a man who is trying to rob a Home Mart cashier, who is none other than Robert's coworker. Because at that time there were many visitors with children, Robert chose to grant the robber's wishes, including the gold ring that the cashier had. Robert let the man off the hook, but clearly remembered the license plate of the car the man was driving. Long story short, the next day, the female cashier was very surprised to find out that her ring, which was robbed yesterday, was suddenly in the cash register, and Robert was seen wiping the big hammer he used last night to knock out the robber and take back the ring. That night, surprisingly, Teddy comes to Robert's house and claims to be a police officer who is investigating the Slavi murder case. Teddy then asks about the whereabouts of Robert, who was in a fancy restaurant on the night of Slavi's murder. Robert, who had been trained to deal with the situation, then calmly answered all the questions asked by Teddy to avoid the man's suspicions. After asking Robert, Teddy said goodbye and left immediately. However, both Teddy and Robert both knew they had lied. Robert can already guess that Teddy is not a policeman, and Teddy concludes that Robert is the mastermind behind Slavi's murder.
Remember where from? What happened to us?
I'll be in touch.
Knowing that the Russian mafia is now after him, Robert immediately arranges a plan to leave his apartment. Long story short, Teddy orders one of his men to attack Robert at the diner, where Robert can easily knock out Teddy's men.
Hands where I can see him. We take a little walk across the street, me and you. Like,
Here we go.
you vary from these instructions and I'm gonna kill you, understand?
No witnesses.
Robert then exits the diner and finds Teddy in his car, where Robert then takes a picture of the man with his cell phone camera. Teddy and his men then chased Robert to his apartment, but they did not find the man there. While searching the apartment, intending to find a clue as to who Robert really is, Teddy finds nothing but drugs and torn sports tickets. On the other hand, Robert turns out to be somewhere else and watching the movements of Teddy and his henchmen through a hidden camera in his apartment. Knowing that he is dealing with one of the largest Russian criminal organizations in the world, Robert decides to visit his old friend and colleague at the Defense Intelligence Agency, Susan Palmer, who uses her resources to give Robert information about Vladimir Pushkin and his operations. Susan also informs Robert that Teddy Renson's real name is Nikolai Ichenko. After giving all the information that Robert wanted, Susan told her husband that Robert didn't ask for help, but he asked for permission. To destroy Pushkin's operations in the United States, Robert first goes to Pushkin's cash vault, where Robert can easily incapacitate all of Pushkin's men, lock them all in the refrigerator, and then call the police and leave evidence in the form of a memory stick that loaded with information about Pushkin's illegal activities. In the evening, Teddy is seen having dinner at a fancy restaurant. In front of him appears a man who turns out to be a trained assassin, who was hired by Teddy to kill Robert. However, shortly after the man left Teddy's table, Robert then entered the restaurant and approached Teddy. Robert then sat there, handing Teddy the hitman's cracked and bloodied glasses. Robert then reveals that he already knows about Teddy's past and warns Teddy to stop pursuing him, and pledging to bring down Pushkin's criminal enterprise. Later, Robert destroys oil tankers belonging to Pushkin, and ultimately destroys Pushkin's entire business in the United States. After that, Teddy immediately set up a plan to immobilize Robert. Teddy and his henchmen go to the Home Mart store and take several of Robert's co-workers as hostages. After that, Teddy called Robert and threatened to kill Robert's co-workers if he didn't come to the Home Mart store soon. Apparently Robert had expected this, where he managed to sneak into the control room and tune into the loudspeaker to distract Teddy and his henchmen. After knocking down some of Teddy's men, Robert then frees Ralphie and asks him to help their co-workers escape through the back door. After making sure Ralphie and all his co-workers were in a safe place, Robert then turned off the main lighting in the Home Mart store, leaving only the dim spotlights. Robert immediately kills Teddy's men one by one using the tools there. And eventually confronts Teddy and kills him with a nail gun. Three days later, Robert travels to Moscow and kills all of Pushkin's guards at his mansion. Robert tricks Pushkin into electrocuting himself to death.
So it's you. What do you gain from my death?
Peace.
Are you there?
With the death of Vladimir Pushkin, it is certain that all of his illegal operations have been terminated. After Robert returned to the United States, Alina, who had recovered from her injuries, approached him outside the grocery store. Alina reveals that she has started a new and better life after being freed from Slavi. Alina also thanked Robert for giving her a second chance and kissed him lightly on the cheek. After what happened to Alina and her co-workers, Robert was inspired to continue to use his skills to help others in need. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy, hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice just to be sure. You should watch the full movie. Thank you very much for watching.